activity in the city. A Baltimore man who gained notoriety after beating nearly a dozen attempted murder charges has been named in a federal indictment that targets one of the most dangerous gangs in the city.
6 people allegedly associated with the Black Guerrilla Family gang. One of them, David Warren, in this described as a contract killer.
Associated with the notorious Black Guerrilla Family gang includes Baltimore rapper YGG Tay, or Devontae Harrison, and David Warren, who gained notoriety after beating nearly a dozen attempted murder charges beginning at the age of 14.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Blood on the Razor Wire TV, where we bring it to you real and we bring it to you raw. Today we're going to talk about BGF. We're going to go into Baltimore. We're going to look at past indictments, new indictments. Everybody's asking me about your boy, Young Thug, and will the feds pick up the case? It's a possibility that they could. And this is just another case where they show you how this shit works, how they will target your ass. If you're out there in the street and you're doing wild things, thinking you're living in the wild, wild west, this is how the feds do it. This is what they do when they come in. You tell me if you think that Young Thug could possibly end up over at the federal courthouse. Let's get to it. Who is David Warren? A contract killer? If you were getting money in the neighborhood and not part of the Black Guerrilla family, David Warren had no problem getting rid of you. Both Warren and YGG Tay gained notoriety after beating nearly a dozen attempted murder charges over the past decade. But the feds finally had enough and stepped in. 6 alleged members of the Black Guerrilla family gang, including Baltimore-based rapper Devontae, YGG Tay, Lore Bip Bip Harrison, were indicted just last week by the feds on accusations they conspired to take part in a violent racketeering enterprise. In addition to Harrison, 28, 5 others indicted included David Michon L.A. Michon Warren, 30, Barack Olds, 33, Wayne Taz Prince, 23, Joshua Josh Duffy, 35, and Tyrell Whitebread Jeffries, 37 years old. 4 of the defendants had already been serving time in prison for various charges. Duffy and Jeffries were arrested Monday, the day the indictment was unsealed. The alleged crimes began in 2014, which, according to the federal indictment, included 6 killings, 11 non-fatal shootings, attempted robberies, drug dealing, and even witness intimidation. The indictment alleges BMF members and associates operated street-level drug distribution shops throughout Baltimore to distribute heroin, cocaine, crack cocaine, marijuana, ecstasy, and other drugs. According to the indictment, Harrison allegedly supplied a BGF member with $10,000 in a gun, which the BGF member used in a homicide. The indictment further alleges that in 2018, Harrison hired Warren as a hitman, and that Warren allegedly tried to kill 3 of Harrison's rivals in exchange for payments from Harrison. The indictment, like we see in so many rappers' cases, sounds like a scary hood novel, but in reality, it's not a novel at all. The indictment says the Black Guerrilla family, also known as Jama, the Swahili word for family, or J for short, is a nationwide gang operation in prisons and on the streets of various cities throughout the United States. Founded in California in the 1960s, BGF appeared in the Maryland correctional system in the 1990s and gained notoriety in the 2000s. Although still a prison gang, BGF is involved in criminal activity including murder for hire, robbery, extortion, narcotics trafficking, obstruction of justice, and witness intimidation throughout Baltimore City, the state of Maryland, and elsewhere. Beginning in the early 2000s, BGF organized its members into regimes on the street, corresponding to particular regions or neighborhoods in Baltimore City and other Maryland communities. Each regime was organized and controlled by a hierarchy called the Bubble, which consisted of a commander, a lieutenant commander, various subordinate ministers, including ministers of justice, defense, education, and finance, as well as other ranks including sergeant at arms and field marshal. Each subordinate had specialized responsibilities, such as the collection of dues and the defense of the regime against rival gangs or drug traffickers. The remaining members of the regime were said to be in the field and were responsible for the directives of the bubble. A bush member, or bushman, BM, not your baby's mother, was a high-ranking senior BGF member. BMs oversaw the activities of multiple regimes within their respective areas of the city. BGF members often referred to bush members as being in the bush. At all times relevant to this indictment, BGF members were required to follow a code of conduct, sometimes called the 22s and 33s, or collectively, the 55s. This code of conduct set forth the rules by which all BGF members are governed, including, for example, never violate the Treasury Department. Don't play with that bread. It could be fatal. Never participate in snitching. Death for a violation. Never steal from Jama. Never lie to Jama. Never participate in homosexual activities. Never reveal the mysteries or the secrecy of the dragon. A two-headed dragon is one of the symbols of BGF. And never run during combat. You can't be a coward. BGF members who violated this code or who disobeyed an order from a superior were subject to disciplinary measures called sanctions, including fines, physical beatings, stabbings, and you already know, murders administered by other BGF members. The indictment sounds dangerous. It sounds scary. Nobody was off limits. If you violated, you could become a victim. On or about June 29, 2014, the indictment says Harrison paid a BGF member to murder TJ because Harrison believed that TJ owed him money for a supply of narcotics that Harrison had provided on consignment. Harrison supplied the BGF member with $10,000 and a pistol, which the BGF member used to make sure that TJ would take his last breath at the 1300 block of Ward Street in Baltimore City. On or about May 27, 2015, at the direction of an unindicted co-conspirator. What does that mean? A senior BGF member, Warren and Jeffries, fired upon a group of rivals who were attending a candlelight vigil for a deceased rival near the intersection of North Rose and East Monument Streets. The attack resulted in the non-fatal shooting of SR. There were many shootings. Some lost their lives, some did not. But where did BGF come from? The Black Guerrilla family was founded in 1966 by former Black Panther George Jackson, who wrote the seminal prison memoir Soledad Brother in California's infamous San Quentin prison. Edward Bunker, an ex-con turned author who found success in Hollywood, described George Jackson in his memoir, Miseducation of a Felon. George Jackson, I remember plain as day. Him and maybe 6 or 7 others ran down a tier and started stabbing white guys just because they were white. But like a lot of gangs that were formed on strict racial lines in California's brutal prison system, the BGF turned to drugs to gain power inside the netherworld world of corruption and violence. The BGF took a particularly strong hold on Maryland's prisons, where in return for membership and status in the gang, prison recruits enjoyed power, prestige, influence, and protection. The LA street gang, the Crips, are strongly aligned with the BGF, along with other black gangs and organizations. The BGF acted as an anchor in prison to unite the street gangs on racial lines, to stand tall against the Mexican Mafia and Aryan Brotherhood, rival California race-based prison gangs. The BGF traces its roots in Maryland through Eric Brown, who was locked up in the Metropolitan Transit Center in Baltimore in the late 2000s, and oversaw the writing of the Black Book, a BGF manifesto intended to empower blacks in prison and in the community. As the book spread throughout the system, new recruits flocked to the BGF banner, and Brown became a very powerful man. Eric Brown was the one who started the BGF in the Maryland system. A prisoner and former BGF member has said anonymously. He's in the feds now, but when he was in the Maryland system, he was running shit. He started all that corrupting officers and bringing in drugs and shit. He showed the brothers how to do it right and get away with it. All it takes is a single, charismatic leader to bring a gang together and shape its reputation. Using cell phones smuggled in by corrupt officers, Brown organized drug deals and authorized beatings of wayward members and enemies of the gang. He also had officers bring him lavish meals and Grey Goose vodka to wash it down, according to court documents. But Brown and 24 associates were indicted in 2009 and pled guilty to racketeering 2 years later. When Brown was shipped into the Federal Bureau of Prisons, Tavon Big Dog White emerged as the new leader for the BGF in the Maryland system. Prison officials were doing all they could to limit the gang's activities, but arrests did little to slow the BGF's rise. Still to this day, the arrests seem to mean nothing. The BGF is strong in Maryland, as most people know. Whether you're from there or not, everyone knows that BGF is as real as it gets on the streets of Bmore, as well as inside the prison system. It started in the jails and prisons and moved out to the streets. It was a movement from the inside out. Right under the noses of correctional officers, the gang took root, with new prisoners recruited to serve as BGF carriers or to pay a monthly fee. You gotta pay to play, one dude explained. It ain't pretty. You either do what the BGF wants, or it's your ass. Prisoners who refuse to play the BGF's game are targeted for violence, and correctional officers aren't immune to the gang's tactics, nor their violence. The problem is you got all these dudes in prison and all these females from the same neighborhoods working there. I've seen this 1,000 times myself in Youngstown, Ohio, CCA, to county jails, and even prisons. What do you think is going to happen? These dudes got power, even in prison, and the homegirls, the correctional officers or not, are attracted to powerful men. Nearly 7% of inmates at the Baltimore City Detention Center have said in the past that they have had sexual contact with officers. Nationwide, the rate is less than 2%. Simply said, chicks are and always will be getting banged in jail in places like Bmore. It happens more often than not. BGF members at the detention center use sex to secure the allegiance of some of the correctional officers, all of whom are women that would later be arrested by the feds. The gang recruited prison employees and used hidden compartments and shoes to smuggle heroin, ecstasy, tobacco, cell phones, and other contraband. It's been reported that over half of the approximately 650 officers at the Baltimore City Detention Center were involved in contraband smuggling. Court documents substantiated this, contradicting claims in the past by prison officials that the majority of their staff members at the jail were clean. Authorities claim that the gang's revolutionary stance and rhetoric are a big attraction for those who want to be affiliated with the legacy of radical black insurgency. The tale of the Black Panthers and the BGF is romantic to many inner-city residents trying to fight their way out of poverty. The infamy adds excitement to an otherwise mundane existence. The American gangster-type urgency is a strong influence for many in troubled urban environments. But all the corruption has turned the Maryland state prison system into a haven for the gang. The BGF runs the Maryland system in more ways than one. Everyone knows that. Tavon White had bragged about earning $16,000 during a slow month. Percocet pills that cost $10 outside the prison walls, for instance, went for 3 times as much behind bars. 1 gram of weed sold for $50, a profit of about $1,000 an ounce. It's all about the hustle. Dude had power for real, one person said. White had power and plenty of it. He enjoyed being the man, and BGF was his way of making sure he was taken care of in every way possible. He had the gift of gab and used it from everything to making money to impregnating at least 4 of the COs working at the Baltimore jail while he was a prisoner. Like Sinatra, he had it his way. He made sure the homies that were around him enjoyed the forbidden fruits as well. It would be an understatement to say White did not have shit on lock. One member said, "When they shipped me into the feds to serve out my sentence, I was mad. I wanted to stay in the city to do my time." Eventually, White would become the government's star witness in the prosecution of others. The what? The star witness. In fact, he would testify at the trial of Freddie Curry. Curry was charged with killing Raynard Benjamin in 2011. With little evidence, the prosecution dropped the charges. Eventually, White would become the government's star witness in the prosecution of others. In fact, he would testify at the trial of Freddie Curry. Curry was charged with killing Raynard Benjamin in 2011. With little evidence, the prosecution dropped the charges. With Tavon White on their side, they decided to recharge him in 2014. White would drop jewels about BGF that has been kept secret. While walking into the large ceremonial courtroom of the U.S. District Courthouse on Lombard Street with extra security around him, he wore a dark polo shirt over his stocky frame along with khakis and tennis shoes. He was getting ready to do what no one thought he ever would. He had tentatively leaned forward in the witness box, answering Harding's questions, the prosecutor, with little hesitation. White had said he had joined the BGF gang in 1997 while serving time for murder at the Roxbury Correctional Institute in Hagerstown. That was more than a decade before the gang's stranglehold on the state's correctional institutions would be thrust into the spotlight as part of a 2009 indictment about corruption. Harding asked why he joined. Because they was, at the time, pretty much running the institution, White testified. Joining was attractive because of the protection afforded from other gangs and the BGF itself, he said. At one point, White testified the gang reconstituted itself after correctional officials obtained paperwork that revealed the gang's inner workings. As time passed, the gang's influence spread from the inside of the state's jails and prisons to the streets. But White said he wasn't an active member of the gang after his release. After he was arrested on the attempted murder charges in 2009 that he was sitting in jail on and sent to the city jail, he rejoined the gang and his reputation carried weight. Even though he wasn't a Bushman, a term for the highest-ranking BGF members, he was selected to lead the BGF in the jail. 2 other ranking members thought they should be chosen instead. White said the matter was settled during a jail cell conference call made over a contraband cell phone. They put their stamp of approval on me, White would say. Being a leader allowed a member to sit back and kick your feet up, so to speak, and meant he wouldn't be called on to carry out attacks. In one recorded phone conversation played for the jury, an adoring correctional officer, Adina Rice, can be heard asking White how he accumulated so much power. "I stepped back for the first week, watched who was doing what, and made myself into what I was," White told her. Rice cooed, "That's what's up." During his testimony, White provided the names of those he said ran the gang on the streets and within the facility, ticking off names like Doc, Pinky, and Fat Will, and said he knew most of them only through phone conversations. He told the jury, with guards standing on both sides of him to keep him safe, that Curry, aka King of the Hood, confided in him that he had took Benjamin's last breath. But White's testimony would mean little as a jury acquitted Curry of the murder. When it was all said and done, he would give up his prestige in BGF in exchange for a 12-year term in prison that would run concurrently with the 20 years he was already serving for an unrelated attempted murder charge. BGF could not and would not be stopped. In early 2019, Sean Thomas, aka Bucky, would be sentenced at the age of 38 years old to 35 years in the feds for participating in a racketeering conspiracy as a leader in the Black Guerrilla Family Gang. 35 years on a plea. What do the streets have for you? The feds allege that he had run the Greenmont Avenue area, polluting it with drugs, violence, corruption, and even murder. As detailed in Thomas's plea agreement on December 9, 2016, Thomas ordered another BGF member to murder Keith Ramsey, a Bloods gang member, as part of an ongoing dispute between the two gangs. He also admitted that he was a high-ranking member of BGF, controlling a regime in the 2700 block of Greenmont Avenue in North Baltimore. During the course of the conspiracy, Bucky obtained narcotics, including crack cocaine, which he distributed through BGF-controlled open-air drug shops. Thomas also collected gang dues for BGF. According to prosecutors, they said BGF organizes its members into regimes or bubbles corresponding to particular regions or neighborhoods in Baltimore City and other Maryland communities. Each bubble reports to, as we said before, a bush member or a bushman who controls larger swaths of territory on behalf of BGF. Bush members are elder statesmen of BGF and maintain inter-bubble discipline and settle disputes among the various bubbles operating in the territory that the bush member controls. The BGF in Maryland may be stronger on the streets now than the original chapter in California. In Baltimore, the gang has taken over many established drug markets, just as they took over the city jail. And with it, Maryland's founder Eric Brown and the feds, the gang is now spreading into the upper tier of the American prison system. The recent hype surrounding the gang has fortified their already legendary status. It's increasingly clear that despite all the recent indictments, the mystique of the gang is only growing. So now check this out, right? If you were to read that Young Thug indictment, right, and look at all the evidence, do you think they could charge him in federal court? And as for these cats, you heard the newscaster. Old boy started popping people at 14. Where were his parents at? And I'm going to keep it 100 with you. I got a couple clients that, have cases out of Baltimore. These dudes are hit. I mean, they're not playing games over there. They're hit. And just keep watching. Stay tuned and see what happens. See how people start to, fold or whatever. You see the other kid, he ends up taking a cop out. He takes a plea and he gets 35 years. Is he really going to do 35 years? There's some speculation about this case. You never know what's going to happen. But, of course, in time, you'll see. Really, it's a message, man, to wake up. I mean, this shit's been going on with BGF for a long time. I mean, don't you think it's time to be like, man, I'm cool. I don't really want to be a part of that. I don't want to be a part of that movement. Because everybody that's been a part of it is pretty much going to prison for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Like, your life's over. Go ahead, sign up with us, and this is what's going to happen. And the feds know all the business, right? It's all in the indictment. They tell you the structure. They tell you the Constitution. They tell you how it works. They know everything. It's not a secret anymore. Man, hopefully this video will make you think, man. Blood on the Razor Wire TV. Until tomorrow, we're out.